Okay, so let's start today. Welcome to today's webinar on PCI MPoC. My name is Guillermo Lagarriga, and I'm the Business Developer Director at Applus Laboratories. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Today, we are thrilled to bring together professionals from Applus and Reekon to discuss the main updates on PCI MPoC specifications. Before we begin, if you allow me, I would like to give you a brief introduction to Applus. I promise this will be the only Applus commercial break of the session, short and to the point. So very briefly, Applus is a tech company testing, inspection, and certification with worldwide presence. Within Applus, we have our business cybersecurity unit with more than 200 cybersecurity experts, where we have laboratories in different regions of the world, mainly in US and Canada, Spain, in Europe, China, and Korea. At Applus, we have a deep know-how in cybersecurity. Mainly, we have been working for a long time in hardware security evaluations at the very low level, from secure elements, integrated secure elements, system on chips, MCUs, memory and control units, and memories, and all the software and firmware that is running up the top of these chips. This brings the possibility to test and evaluate a wide range of products, from crypto devices, network solutions, telecom, IoT products, payment and ID, mobile, like SoftPOS, okay, auto components, aerospace and defense, and even medical devices. Our laboratories have a wide range of accreditations, more than 20, that help us, the clients, to enter the products into the market. We have accreditations that are worldwide recognized, like Common Criteria or EUCC, other more industry specific, like payment, of course, very interesting for today's session, or accreditations on PCI for PCI PTS or MPoC, among other payment schemes. Okay, IoT solutions, we are accredited for PSA under the RED directive for helping vendors on the CE mark for cybersecurity, ETSI and EEC 62443. Also, some other accreditations for ticketing or transport, even in telecom, like GSMA. We are also accredited laboratory. So this has been a very short introduction. Now I would like to start with the presentation of our session. So the first part of the session will be the MPoC ecosystem, its key stakeholders, and the latest specification updates. This session will be presented by our PCI expert, Albert Martorell, who serves as the technical domain manager for hardware with security boxes at Applus Laboratories. So welcome, Albert. Then the second part of the session will be the MPoC certification process, which will be covered in the second part by Alan Marzek and Charles Quick from Reekon. For you to know, let me give you a brief introduction about Reekon, who is a security consultancy company. It is specialized in providing pre- and post-certification services. And specifically in the context of PCI, they support their clients with different training, design review, and evidence documentation packages to prepare and maintain PTS and MPoC certification. Alan is the CEO of Reekon, and Charles is more than 10 years experienced security analyst who worked in PCI Laboratories before joining Reekon. Before we begin, here are a few quick housekeeping points. This session will last for 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session at the end. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat that you can find here in the webinar, and we will do our best to address them at the end of the session. So, saying that, let's get started. I would like to hand over to Albert Martorell. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you find this session valuable. So, Albert, the floor is yours.
Well, if you're here, potentially, this is due to you are a service provider, solution provider, that you want to provide some inputs to the merchants, or at the same time, if you are service provider, potentially you want to sell something to solution providers. Then, if you want to do that, you will need to go through the schemes to the brands to perform the functional evaluation, and later on perform the security evaluation. In terms of security evaluation, if you have so specific product, so nice product with a new functionalities, potentially you will need to go directly with these guys. If you are MPoC eligible product, then you could go to the program guide to double check that and go to PCI for the evaluation. In terms of security, we have two main certifications for this kind of product. One is PCI, international one, and the other is CommonSec, that it's more focused on Germany and UK requirements. If we are here, it's because you have a COTS native device that could enter PIN or contactless, and at the same time, you have at least one EMB-based card entry. For sure, in this case, this program will not cover bare boards like Raspberry Pi or other things like that. In this case, PCI have a broad band of programs. Some programs are related with you and other ones no, but it's sure that your clients will need it. In this case, merchants or acquirers will need PCI DSS because they are managing the sensitive data management. And at the same time, they could be certified for P2P and PIN certification too. However, if you manage sensitive data as part of service provider, for example, in your backends or in attestation and monitoring, you will need to pass PCI DSS too. Remember that version 1.1 of MPoC, it's voluntary. Version 1.01, it's already there, and you could use it. In this case, there are some relation in between all the schemes that you have there. In this case, for HSM, there are new change that PCI accept to use FIPS 140 level 2 HSMs in controlled environments. At the same time, if we are talking of external readers, you could use PCI or not PCI accredited terminals, and Appendix E of the specification will check that. At the same time, in terms of software lifecycle, software management, PCI have a nice specification, SSF, about that. In this case, if you don't follow that, no matter, you could go to Appendix D, and we will check that there. At the same time, for sure, you will assure the management on PIN. This is assured by PCI PIN. And at the same time, if you are in the role that you need PCI DSS, Appendix A have a mapping table in between DSS and MPoC, and with that, you can avoid some testing. Finally, P2P, it's only for to keep PIN encryption, and then it's not going to be needed in this certification. PCI MPoC, it's very big. It's a lot of options, external readers, internal readers, PIN, without PIN, secure element, TE, a lot of options for implementation. It's fully open, your implementation, but there are some requirements. For example, in case of magnetic stripe readers, it's not expected that you support PIN on this specification for MSR. At the same time, it's very important that you take care about your assets and location of them to assure that this is acceptable. It's true that in that specification, you will have some requirements that you could or not pass depending on your implementation. This is the case of scrambled keypads. You could use scrambled keypads to protect your device, or you could not have it if you have the security measures to avoid the PIN capture. One of the most interesting points in PCI MPoC is the SDKs. You could use two SDKs in the same application. You could use one SDK inside other SDK, or at the same time, you could use one SDK inside another SDK, but could use a non-payment SDK. This case could be fully certified by PCI. It's important to mention that the SDKs must be informed about their version. This version must be provided to the application to be checked. At the same time, it's not expected to distribute the SDK as source code. SDK will not send sensitive data to the application, neither to the COTS device. This must be fully secure. At the same time, it's expected an integration of this SDK in the application and then in a solution, and this is going to be a request, a security guidance to do that. The PCI MPoC implementation, it's so important. And in this implementation, you could have an isolated environment with an SDK. It means that this SDK will protect itself with memory and assets up to 25 points. At the same time, MPoC software execution outside of RE must be authenticated previous to the execution. And for sure, secure deletion of transaction data in COTS device must be performed. Then we have three options. One is MPoC software, second, MPoC service, third, MPoC solution. In this case, the SDK will only talk with COTS platform, and SDK will talk with MPoC application. At the same time, it's important that MPoC service is combined of two parts, attestation and monitoring, and payment services. Following that, it's important to mention that MPoC standard is expected to be in a requirement attended environments. For these things, we have the MPoC service. And MPoC service is super good in this case because you could use this service for a lot of MPoC softwares. At this case, we have some kind of certifications that you could follow. One for sure, it's MPoC software. You could certify your software and later on certify the solution with this software. Secondly, we have the MPoC attestation and monitoring service that later on could be certified as MPoC solution too. The third case is that you have an attestation and monitoring plus payment processing, and later you certify the MPoC solution integrated in a full solution. But no matter if you have only one product, full stack, then you could go to monolithic solution. And finally, the news and interesting solution for a lot of people is that if you are a service provider, you could provide a full stack with only one certificate. It means the software core, the attestation and monitoring, and everything. And then you could sell this to a merchant, and merchant could perform their own certification without the need of the laboratory. Another important point is the vulnerability assessment. The vulnerability assessment is some important part of the evaluation because you must assure your solution and your security. This could be performed by vulnerability assessment itself or pen testing. In pen testing way, you could perform yourself pen testing, but it's going to be request a very skilled person. At the same time, it's expected that you have a baseline and there must exist this baseline and validated by attestation and monitoring services. All this must be repeated every year in frequency checks for vulnerabilities. At the same time, random number generation is so important. In this case, it's expected a sufficient entropy source and a true source. Finally, we have the NXC. An NXC will provide you some guidance about size and strength of your keys. And at the same time, it's expected that you could have a KEK that is weak, but you have a minimum protection of 128 bits. A brief description in here is that we have a new MPoC specification 1.1 that appeared latest last year. We have a new program guide that appeared just last week, and we will have a new attestation of validation documentation that will appear next days. Finally, for sure, potentially could be an update of frequently asked question document. As ever, this is a super important document that gives you some clues over how to do things. Finally, for sure, now it's time to talk about the process. Then you will need to sign a vendor release agreement with PCI, later provide documentation to the lab. Lab will perform their work, you will pay PCI, and you will receive an MPoC certificate. For sure, every year you will need to perform an annual checkpoint, and every 3 years you need to revalidate this product. Now it's time that Alan give you more clues about that.
Thank you very much, Albert. And I would like to say hello to everybody and thanks for joining today. And thanks for Applus also to give us the opportunity to share our experience today. So we'll start by taking just 1 or 2 minutes to explain you what we do at Reekon. And then later on, after I will quickly give the floor to Charles to explain you the groundwork we have been doing with our clients on MPoC projects. So I'll go to next slide, I believe. So our mission, Reekon, actually, what do we do? In a nutshell, our job is to simplify the work that our clients, and which are solution developers, they want to go for certification. And our job is to simplify what they have to do before and after the certification. So what does that mean? So in our world, we have more and more standards, security-related standards, more and more processes, which are often now becoming continuous process. So the work on compliance, security compliance in general, is getting pretty heavy. And often we see that the work falls onto the engineers, the solution developers, the technical guys that would prefer to actually develop, the solution itself or new features. So our job as Reekon is very simple, is to take, make this part, the certification preparation and certification maintenance after all the work, to make it easier for companies and vendors and engineers. So how do we do that? I'll go to next slide, I believe. And so what we do here, that's a bit in the context of MPoC and PCI in general. So what we do is we create set of services related to a standard. So we do have trainings, we do have design and architecture services. So we review architectures, tweak it. We call that standard to features steps. So we translate the standard into what kind of features are expected in the product. We do consulting, which is like day-to-day support to the vendors, and also some testing services. So penetration testing, test tool provision. So we try to do A to Z solution to prepare for certification, and then post-certification, which is something important. I just spent 10 seconds on that. So quite often, vendors are like getting certified and they are like, okay, now I can go back to my daily job. That's less and less possible. So quite often now you need to maintain your documentation. You need to have regular pen testing, all of that. And that's where we keep actually accompanying our clients. So not only to help them get the certification, but then maintain it as well. So that's what we do at Reekon. Our objective today is simple. We want to share like our experience from about, I think, 20 projects on MPoC, helping companies, 20 projects about. And there are a lot of complex, but also very basic rules that and advice we would like to give to people. So Charles is going to take over and share with you, the do's and don'ts, the questions we get, the basic steps that you can follow to at least kickstart your journey, MPoC journey. But of course, if you want to know more, please do ask some question at the end of the session, please. And thank you for listening. Charles, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experience on the PCI MPoC certification process. Speaking of the MPoC certification process, it is commonly perceived by the new players as a simple, linear, step-by-step process as shown in this diagram. In their mind, it is to retrieve a certificated product. All you need to do is to spend time in developing, then you get the product, you send the product to the laboratory, then you get the certification. Yeah, you get a certificate. Apparently, this is not how it works in practical. However, our experience told us over and over again that some developers are expecting, or at least hoping, such simplified cycle. And they actually plan their work and their product release date in such manner, which eventually become problematic because the reality looks a bit more like this. Yeah, don't get scared. I will try to break them down. Yeah. So the evaluation process, so the certification process starts way earlier than you probably imagine. Before you start designing your product, it is very crucial to set up a proper development environment, which ideally to have the entire development team PCI SLC or SSF certified, or at least have the equivalent security software development lifecycle environment, which means you shall have a clear security policy to define the security framework, establish the rules and goals regarding the security, then implement all kinds of procedures to satisfy the security policy. The procedures include code review process, risk management, change control process, third-party management, etc., etc. There are much more procedures than what I listed here. Okay, and once all the processes are in place, it can ensure the code development in such environments is secured, and you are now able to start design and develop your product. And at this stage, the first thing you need to decide is the product type. As about to mention in the previous slides, MPoC supports multiple types of product to be listed on the PCI portal. It introduced the modular approach, so you can not only have the full solution certified, but also have part of the solution components certified, such as PCI MPoC service or the MPoC software. And for MPoC software, you have different categories like MPoC application or MPoC SDK. And the SDK can further be divided into the non-isolated one and isolated one. Yeah. So you should have a good, clear understanding on these concepts to make your final decision. Yeah. Once you start to design and develop your product, you need to make sure it's compliant with all the security objects of the MPoC requirements. And depending on the product type, you might need to have some part of your product to be pre-certified by other schemes, such as PCI DSS, PCI PIN, PCI PTS, etc. Yeah. And when you have your product ready, you need to perform vulnerability assessment on the entire software, as well as the interface in between the components. And after all of this done, you can now send your product together with the evidence where you collect everywhere from the development process, from your design document, from the vulnerability assessment report. Yeah, you collect evidence and you send together with your product to the lab, and the lab will start the evaluation process. Yeah, they will perform design reviews, document reviews, code review, and perform functional and penetration tests, and arrange interviews with you to verify your product, which might end up at a product revision, which is required if anything is incompliant is found. And this can have a few rounds of iteration until you eventually get the certificate from PCI. Yeah? And the story does not stop when you get the certificate. You're supposed to maintain your product afterwards and consider delta evaluation in case you want to modify your product in the future. And this is the whole process. And yes, every block in this diagram is in scope of PCI MPoC, because MPoC is not a scheme of a final product, but a scheme covering the entire life cycle of the product. And the security activities and the related process are expected to be continued even after receiving the approval. Yeah, we are supposed to have a secure team to be involved in the certification process and maintain the topics in different domains on both technical and non-technical aspects. Yeah, and up next, I will talk about the major activities during the certification process. To make things easier, I divide the process into 3 different phases. Yeah, the pre-evaluation phase, the pre-certification phase, the certification phase, and the post-certification phase. Yeah, the scope of the post-certification phase is actually bigger than it looks like here, because it shall maintain everything on the left side to be still maintained. Yeah. Okay. Now let's have a look at the major milestone activities of the pre-evaluation phase, together with some of our suggestions. Yeah. The first thing to do at this stage is to have your team study and get trained on the MPoC requirements. Make sure they have a good knowledge baseline, because MPoC requirements are very complicated and sometimes even confusing due to the objective-oriented way how the requirement is described. Yeah? You might encounter difficulty time to understand the PCI's true intention on certain requirements. So large amount of time is expected to be spent at this stage, and external support probably also be required. Yeah. And once you understand the MPoC requirement, you can start to decide the product type, as we mentioned a bit earlier. Yeah. MPoC is very flexible on what can be approved and listed. You can be a software vendor, can be a solution vendor, can be a service vendor. Yeah. You can sell your solution to acquire. You can sell your solution, your software to the solution vendor, or you can even sell your software to another software vendor. Yeah, there are many, many options. And you should decide carefully based on the market goal of your company. And yeah, we can help on that if you need. Yeah. And other activities you need to spend enormous time at this stage is to establish the secure development environment. Yeah, the official policies and procedures need to be defined later on here. Yeah, for the process development process following the PCI SLC requirements. And one more thing before you hands-on development is to validate and freeze your product architecture. You shall take time to establish, review, and freeze the architecture. This is a mandatory step we usually enforce our partner, because we do not recommend to move to the documentation and the development phase before a architecture is settled for the, obviously the efficiency reason. Yeah. And when you develop your product, you need to make sure you are following the policies and procedures defined by the security development environment. You're also supposed to keep necessary records and evidence when developing, and these can be used later on during the evaluation phase to approve the lab that your security development lifecycle works as intended. Yeah. And when developing, you should always keep an eye on the MPoC requirement and perform gap analysis as much as possible and revise your design when necessary until your product is eventually fully compliant with MPoC requirements. And this usually takes a few rounds of iteration. Yeah. Besides the actual product, the documentation, or we usually call it evidence, will be also evaluated at the lab. So you need to spend time on this before you go to the lab. Yeah. The policies and procedures should already be ready at this point. And by following the vulnerability assessment process, the penetration test report should also be ready. And depending on your product type, you might need to get necessary certificates at this stage. Yeah. And finally, the design documents describing the detail of your product's features, the functions, the security mechanism should also be prepared. Yeah. What's to mention? The orange items here is we as Reekon, as a consultancy company, always spend more time when we help our customer. So it deserves to pay extra attention on it. Yeah. Now let's move to the evaluation phase. So at this stage, submitting the final report and providing perfect evidence to the secure lab is the first thing, and it is very crucial thing. Yeah. You should target to have everything ready at least 2 weeks prior to the evaluation to allow the time for booking finalization of the delivery and the checks. Yeah. And depending on the quality of your delivery, you might be asked to provide extra support to the lab to help them understanding your product better. Yeah. And also get prepared to take the interviews from the lab it is mandatory by many MPoC requirements which requesting the lab to ensure the personnel who developing or operating the product has sufficient competence to perform their task. Yeah. In case issues are found by the lab, they usually, inform you weekly or monthly on the feedback, and you are obligated to address the issues as quick as possible. And when necessary, you need to revise your product. Yeah. And when all the issues are resolved, the lab will complete the evaluation report and submit it to PCI. PCI will start to review the report. They will raise inquiries usually, and the lab can handle the queries by themselves in most of the case, but sometimes they might also need your support there. Yeah. And once all the questions are cleared out, congratulations, you get the PCI MPoC certificate. But keep in mind, the journey does not stop here. Yeah. Because we still have the post-evaluation phase, which we usually also call it maintenance. Yeah. The vulnerability assessment and the penetration testing shall be regularly executed, either at a fixed interval or when major changes are implemented. And if such major change appears, you shall follow your change control policies to execute a new threat modeling exercise. And you shall request the delta evaluation from the secure lab in case security relevant changes are implemented. Yeah. And the development and operation policies and procedures shall still be strictly followed. The documentation needs to be maintained. This is something that really well executed from our experience. Keep in mind, there is an annual check from the secure lab to ensure this. Okay. Now let's have a look at some of the common issues that we encountered during our consultancy. Yeah. The first thing is the scope unclear. Yeah. So because MPoC solution has multiple components remotely connect with each other, the major components are the application at the code side, the A&M backend, and the processing backend. But the reality is not always as clear as this, especially when some of your product feature relies on a third-party online service. Are these services part of the MPoC scope, or can they be excluded? Yeah. It can end up at a lengthy discussion if you do not have a clear view on the product architecture and are not familiar with the requirement. Yeah. And the second most common issue we have is the SDK does not fully isolate the assets. From our experience, almost all the MPoC SDK vendor want their product certified as a fully isolated SDK, which allows their customer care little on the security when integrating. Yeah. However, the memory separation is often neglected. Furthermore, if Android key store is used, things becomes even difficult because the key store can have access by both the SDK and the integration application due to the Android OS design. Yeah. The third point, missing mutual authentication for secure channel. The TLS does not provide by default mutual authentication. Many developers are not aware of this, especially when implementing secure channel in between different backend environments. Yeah. Next, no real-time anti-tampering mechanism. So the harmful operating modes of the OS, such as a rooted OS or the OS enabled the developer mode. Yeah, this shall be checked at a real time, and this is something not always be implemented and not easy to implement as well due to the impact, the possible impact to the performance. Next is the bad key management. This is again a hardest hit area. The insecure key exchange process, exposing secret keys in the memory, or protecting stronger keys with weaker keys, etc., etc. There's always a lot of problem. And one of the most common issue we've seen is the implementation of the DUKPT, or say DocPort. Yeah, many vendors store the initial key IPK on the code side. By doing this, it effectively downgrades the dogport key scheme into a fixed key scheme, which is not acceptable by MPoC. Last but not least, insufficient protection during transaction process. So it is worth to aware that extra protections are required besides the regular attestation activities, such as the side channel protection during the pin entry process, the anti-screen recording features, the anti-overlay, the disabling of the cameras, etc. All these additional features are sometimes, forgotten by the vendor. Yeah. And the mistakes and issues can also be contained in the evidence document. Yeah, like missing evidence is very common. Actually, unless you are very, very familiar with MPoC requirements. Otherwise, without any external support, it is almost infeasible to provide the lab a complete set of evidence covering all the aspects of MPoC in one go. Yeah. And expired certificate is another problem we always met, because you need extra certificate in some case, such as the PCI DSS, PCI PIN certificate. Yeah. Before you can apply the MPoC. Yeah. And all the certificates are time valid. You need to at least make sure all the AOCs of the certificates are not expired before you receive your MPoC certificate. Yeah. Naming inconsistency is also very often to be seen. A large number of documents are required for MPoC evaluation. These documents are usually written by different people. The names and the terminologies inconsistency in between the documents always happens, yeah, which can increase the difficulty for the lab to understand your design. And similarly, the inconsistency of implementation description, yeah, because the documents are typically not written after the product is fully final. We often see some part of the documents describing an older version of the product, yeah. And this can again cause unnecessary efforts for the secure lab during assessment. And the last point with here is the policies and procedures are not followed. Yeah, we sometimes even seen the vendor approach the MPoC certification in a reversed order. Yeah, they first have their product ready, then start to create policies and procedures for the security development environment. This apparently cannot work well, as you have a very difficult time to prove that you are following the policies and procedures during the document review and the interviews from the lab. Yeah, this can cause problem. Yeah, and by the way, on the right side, you'll see how we as Reekon to split the document into different categories, which might help you when you are building your team to get support from your management or when requesting resources, for example. Yeah. And contact us if you need further support. We are really happy to help. Yeah. Then allowed me to give back the floor to Alan for the conclusion of this presentation. Alan?
Yes, I think I'm back. So yes, if you can display the takeaways. So
yeah,
in general, what we see is a bit repeating what has been said already. So certification is a complex process in general, preparing, certifying, and maintaining. So plan ahead. Time is always of the essence. Early engagement with your team, building the right processes in advance, not at the last minute. Engaging with the lab, engaging early with PCI as well is key. So we often see clients that think they are ready. They think it's a 2-3 months process. It's usually much longer than that. So plan ahead. It seems simple, but that's still the key takeaway that we see from this project. And again, the main changes is, I think, we have seen happening is this continuous process. So pre-certification post-certification is another important takeaway. So maintenance, how do you maintain your process? How do you maintain your certification is key. And that means it's key for, allocating resources to it, either internal, either external, but that has to be planned. Otherwise, you end up, like I always say, as, the students that pass his exam and then forgets everything the next day. We try to avoid that because now it's a recurrent process, obviously. And finding the right partners, happy to help as Reekon. We hope it was interesting for you that we share this point. So I'll give the floor back to Guilhem and eventually for some Q&As, if any. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alan, Charles, Albert, for these excellent presentations. I think that has been very, very interesting to hear your explanations today. Maybe Albert and Charles, if you want to connect the camera, and let's move now to the Q&A session. We have some questions from the audience that I would like to pick up and see if we can provide responses and provide feedback to them. Starting, I think we had a first question talking about the semi-attended POS. I guess that the question is asking if it falls into the MPoC certification, the semi-attended POS. So maybe here, I don't know, Charles, Albert, would like to elaborate something on this, if there is a requirement here, if it's feasible to certify a semi-attended POS under MPoC?
This standard is expected to be attended, okay? And it's due to the security of the device. At the end, it's an open device that could be manipulated, and it's expected that someone could attend this transaction. Then semi-attended POIs are something that could be in some way attended for someone that it's ruling on place, but it's not the expectation of the essence of MPoC. However, if you have this kind of a solution, for sure, you could contact the schemes, and the schemes will guide you about all the options outside of MPoC or with some definitions extra that they could require you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Here we have a question that the back-end environment is PCI DSS, okay, certified. Is this enough? Should we require something else for the back-end environment? Who would like to take this question?
Okay, so it depends on what data, let's say the account data your environment is processing. If the environment is processing clear text pin data as well, then you will be request PCI pin as well on above PCI DSS. If it's only processing the non-pin account data, then PCI DSS will be sufficient. Yeah. There used to be the requirements for the A&M backend to requesting additional appendix of PCI DSS, which is called PCI DSV. But this requirement is removed from MPoC 1.1. And it's also removed in MPoC 1.0 by the FAQ, official FAQ from PCI. So that is not in scope. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Charles, for the feedback. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, so Samet Aslan mentioned that this case, let's assume that you have a certified product and you made some change on the source code, which affects security of the software, okay? Could Delta process be performed after annual check, or should it be before annual check? Is there a mandate for the order of the flow? What is your suggestion in this case?
From my experience, usually it depends on when the change happens and how dramatic the change is. Actually, one of the purpose of the annual review is to make sure, during the past year, the solution vendor or the software vendor does not have any security relevant change not being claimed. Yeah, that's one of the purposes of the annual review. So theoretically, when you have the change applied to your product, you should, and it's security relevant, you should go to the lab, ask their suggestions. if they think this is indeed something, impact the security, you should do the delta evaluation immediately, from my experience.
Okay.
Not wait until the annual review, because those two items are relatively independent. But we also sometimes see the vendor combine the annual review and the delta together. That's also possible if the time of your change and the annual check are more or less in the same time period.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the, thanks, Charles. Let's move on to the next question. From Nicholas is asking, approximately how long does the process takes? So let's say, I guess that from the very beginning, you want to start, okay, I want to certify my MPoC solution. I'm starting from scratch. How long I will expect that I will need to be certified, from the very beginning. I guess engaging initially with companies like Reekon, to supporting the consultancy, the first stage, and then move on through the certification. So some time frame that we can share with the audience, maybe Alan?
I'll take this one if you want, and I'll try to be non-pessimistic. No, usually if people ask from scratch, I usually say plan for a year. We know, let's take it backwards a bit. We know that an evaluation takes time by itself. You can spend 2-3 months with the lab, between, the submitting your evidence, performing the evaluation, doing the paperwork. You've got already a quarter of the year gone there. And then, you've got 3/4 of a year. So I'm saying from the scratch, so meaning you start, building your architecture, doing your training of the team, which we think shouldn't be rushed, So you train your team, you start setting up your development and all that. That's roughly already a few weeks, few months. And then you've got the development. So the development is also, depending on the team again. So 6 months, in best case, doc writing, process writing, doing your SLC, doing your pen testing, eventually all that takes time. So if people ask me from the scratch with a good team, I'll say that plan for a year, and that's a reasonable time frame. If people come and say I need to be ready in 2-3 months, usually we don't take we don't. I mean, we can help obviously, but it's not reasonable. I hope it answered the question on the range, at least.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. Some more questions from Samet. Are dedicated devices like handheld terminals and wearables allowed on MPoC?
Okay,
Albert?
potentially, if we are talking about handhelds, okay, the idea of a handheld, if it's a normal payment terminal, okay, that you use as a dedicated part, this is PCI PTS program, okay, it's another program that it takes care about handhelds for specific payments. If you have a specific COTS native device, it means a tablet, it means a mobile phone, it means this kind of products. For sure, it's going to be MPoC devices. Okay, it's a software inside a general COTS device. Okay, and in terms of wearables, wearables at the end, there are a lot of different definitions and a lot of different options. Okay, if it's a smartwatch that you have a full dedicated device, okay, it means that it's there. This device is like a mobile phone itself, okay. Potentially yes, but you must assure that you are able to provide with this wearable all the functionalities that are requested on the PCI MPoC, okay. For sure, there are some requirements that potentially these small systems must be checked in deep if it's possible or not to be executed there. And at the same time, you have the topic that at least you must have one of the two main things on the COTS native. One is the PIN and the other contactless. Okay, you must assure that this must exist on this wearable if you want to go like MPoC certification.
Perfect. Thank you, Albert. So more questions. See a new question from Andrea. What are the main evidence to be prepared for the certification? do I need to provide the source code to the laboratory?
Yes, the thing source code is mandatory according to the MPoC requirement. You have to provide the source code, at least the source code of the software on the code side to the lab. And the lab will perform their code review based on the source code and make sure, the source code, what is written there is aligned with what you described in your documentation, as well as align with the behavior of the software that the applications that we provided to the lab. Yeah. And regarding what are the evidence, the evidence list is it's quite a list. Yeah, it includes the development environment process, all the process policies, procedures should be included. Yeah. You also should have, the design documents of your product describing all the functions, features, especially the security mechanisms of your product. Yeah, those are also the very important evidence. Besides that, like you also be requested to provide something to demonstrate or approve that the process are being followed. So like meeting minutes, the signed forms, etc., etc. Those are also categorized as the evidence. Yeah, although those are not official documents, but that's something additional that can help the process of the evaluation. Yeah, similar as like the AOCs of the PCI DSS, PCI ping, if required, those are also considered as evidence by the lab. But it's a big bunch of files that you are expected to provide to the lab. And hopefully everything is ready before the evaluation even starts. So that will make the evaluation process smoother.
I want to give a bit of numbers on that just for people to have the perspective. So for us as Reekon, we provide, evidence package, so templates for these documents to be provided. And we are at about, in general, 30 documents that we provide, 30 templates that vendors need to fill with their solution customized information. So that's already 30 documents, and range, some goes from 5-6 pages, some from 30 pages. So it's pretty heavy, and that's non-included what's specific to the company. So the pure evidence to support these policies and templates that we have. So at the end, you end up easily with 50 documents, depending how you arrange that, obviously, and the complexity of the product and the product type you choose. But that's a pretty heavy documentation set also to consider. Therefore, why we always ask people to consider that from the get-go, from the start, to plan for that. That's a lot of paperwork to do. So just to give a bit of numbers and range here.
Okay, good. So thanks for the detailed answer that you provided on the question. We have more questions. Have you any indication, or do you have any indications about the external costs, lab consultancy, and so on? Maybe, I don't know, Alan, we can give some range, or too dangerous to provide these details, maybe better in private.
I mean, yeah, usually in private, but I mean, let's say it really depends. For us, I'm not gonna give the price here, but we try to be pragmatic. First, what we like to do as a first step is a gap analysis. If there is a solution already existing or a first prototype, we like to do a gap analysis, which is a process where we're gonna match your solution with the requirement from MPoC and try to quantify the readiness, the compliance, where you stand. And this is usually, we try to do it within 1 to 2 weeks collaborative work together. So we try to be pragmatic and propose that first, see where we are, and see where we are. So we evaluate the readiness of the solution, but also the processes, the document. So for us, the point is not to go right away into like 6 months already big contract and everything, although we will not say no. But let's start with this pragmatic gap analysis phase, 1 to 2 weeks, and then we see where we are. So that's if there is a solution existing already or a prototype. If not, what we like to do is as simple as starting with in general, we provide a 3 days MPoC training. And training, we go through the standards, and the purpose is with these 3 days, it's a discussion. We evaluate the knowledge, we evaluate the working style, and we evaluate where the solution is at, if there is or if not. And we start talking about roadmaps. So we like to start with these pragmatic small steps at first. So without giving up the price, feel free to reach out, but we try to have this, small engagement at first to see how we can help you for the next 6 months, the next 1 year. So that's the strategy on our side. I'll let you reply on the lab side.
On the lab side, no, I would say that here, I wouldn't say call it cost. I would say more an investment, this part, okay? Because at the end, for a lab point of view, we need to work with mature evidences. We need to work with a product that can successfully pass, say, at the first round. This will be the ideal situation for everyone, because we don't want to enter in iterative rounds of extra cost and so on. So having vendors engaging with companies like Reekon that can support and have a mature evidences for running an evaluation, it will reduce the total cost of the project. Okay, so for the evaluation point of view, this will be very, very important. No? So yeah, in case that you need, the person that asked the question, if you want more details about cost, feel free to reach us and we can provide you more specific numbers, okay, here on the solution. So I see still have time for another question, still on the time. I think Gonzalo is asking, could be DU KPT a good option to key manage? Is it possible that the key is in clear text during the little time previously to store inside TE? You may quite technical question. I don't know if it's Albert or Charles. You may have answer to this or provide some insights for this question.
Can you repeat the question once again? I didn't fully get.
I read again the question. Yeah. It says, could be DU KPT a good option to key manage? Is it possible that the key is in clear text during little time previously to store inside TE?
Inside TE, I assume when they talk about TE, they are talking about hardware, Android hardware key store. That's part of the TE. And how to say that? Yeah, we see implementations that utilize Android hardware key store for DUKPT implementation. It is okay to release, because for DUKPT implementation, you will first during the key exchange phase, you will receive the initial key of the DUKPT, the IPAC. You will then generate up to 21 future keys on the code side, and those future keys are allowed to be stored and protected by the hardware key store, the keys in the hardware key store at least. Yeah. Then when you are using it, you can release the 21 future keys and use one of them, usually the 21st key, as the transaction key. Then you make the magical transformation of the rest 20 keys and make them into another 21 keys. Then reprotect it. If you are using such kind of approach or similar approach, it is no problem, because the forward secrecy is ensured. So even you are exposing the future keys on the code side, I see no problem, at least for MPoC 1.1. There was a problem at 1.0 back the time, but now PCI fixed it in the FAQ, the official FQ, so there's no problem at all. Yeah. But there also, it is not saying you have to use DocPort for the key management for protecting the account data or the PIN. There are also other possibilities, like use a public key protecting is also possible, because PCI even mentioned it in the new MPoC 1.1 requirements. So, and to be honest, I feel that approach is even simpler. So maybe it's worth to have a look at that as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I think that this was the last question that we had in the chat. We are already on time from the whole webinar, 1 hour past. Okay, so we hope this session on PCI MPoC has been insightful and valuable for you. Also, a big thank you to our speakers, Albert, Alan, and Charles, for sharing their expertise, and to all of you for your active participation in the chat. And well, before we conclude, here we have a few takeaways from today's discussion. Okay, we say that the certification is the goal, but continuity both before and after certification is equally important. So our colleagues from Reekon can support you in navigating this process. Early engagement with the security laboratory is also crucial for accurate planning. And at Applus, we are here to help you, to guide you and through this step. And finding the right partners and stakeholders can be a key to success. So choosing wisely can make all the difference. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out by email or connect us with our social media or website. Okay. If you want to review the session, we have recorded and we will publish it soon in our website. Thank you again for your time and engagement. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day, and well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.